me, which normally she's not around during council meetings, so this could get wild, who knows. So let's start then, if we don't know if Cindy's coming or not. Okay, so roll call shows that, let's see, myself, Councillor Perry, Councillor Grenier, Councillor Osher, Councillor Kuntz, and Councillor Robertson are here. We have item number 2, Main Street Sidewalk Project Goals, Scope, and Timeline. And who am I kicking that to, Sophie?
I think it's going straight
Rob?
to me.
Okay.
So yeah, I am very excited to be here talking with you all about, finally talking about this project and getting things started with it. It's a project we've been working on, or at least conceptually been working on for, a couple years now. Working to get funding sources identified, getting, of course, the downtown traffic study sort of started the ball rolling with some potential changes to the way crosswalks are oriented and those sorts of, and ways to make improvements to crosswalks in a, particularly in the downtown area where we've got, some critical pedestrian traffic associated with a number of the businesses, the town hall, and of course the school campus. So this project is going to include essentially all the existing sidewalk on Main Street from the bridge all the way out to Deergo Pines. And based on probably the way the budget will work out, you'll see some varying types of design. As you get further out, you might see pavement versus concrete, those kinds of things. But all the areas within the project will be evaluated to try to make sure that we address 2 major issues. And of course, the first one, well, really 3. The obvious one is that we need to address the crumbling infrastructure that's there now. The sidewalks throughout the entire corridor are in pretty rough shape and need upgrade, even if we weren't considering making some changes with orientation and things like that. But beyond that, and I think probably more importantly, is our focus on making some improvements to the way our pedestrian infrastructure works for the community. And so our big focus is going to be on pedestrian safety. So what technology is out there that we can work into the project to make improvements to crosswalks, but also evaluate where those crosswalks are and the number of those crosswalks. A lot of times crosswalks get placed in areas that, because it's convenient, but it may not be the safest place to have a crossing, or it may be too close to another crossing, and combining those 2 into one crosswalk that you can focus pedestrian traffic to allows for the corridor to work far more efficiently. Those kinds of things will be evaluated very closely. And we're also going to be sure that I'm not going to say meet, I'm going to say exceed American with Disabilities Act standards. So we're going to make ADA improvements to the entire corridor to ensure that we are building an accommodating infrastructure for all people who need to use those crosswalks and sidewalks and all the other parts of the infrastructure that we're going to take a look at. So the focus here really isn't, and I say right in the RFQ that I'll talk about a little bit more, it's not to reconstruct the sidewalks, but it's really to really kind of rethink the pedestrian infrastructure that we have there to make it so that we can add to the overall effect of what sidewalks are supposed to be and make some real safety and ADA improvements. That's really the big goal. The project, so the RFQ, so it would be a qualified based process for selecting the consultant that will help us out with the design of the project, went out today. So those proposals will be due in October, and of course, I got to talk to Sophie about this, but I'm assuming with the goal to be ready to bring a selected consultant and a negotiated contract to you at the October meeting. Once we get through that process, that's when the project really gets kicked off. There'll be a lot of information gathering in the beginning in November. I'm sure they're going to jump right out there and get the survey done so that we can work on design and public input throughout the winter months and be ready to hit the ground running with some, if not all, of the construction next season. I haven't committed to necessarily fitting the entire project into one year because I'm not sure how that is going to work out. But that's going to be one of the things that we'll be working with a consultant to decide is how we phase through that. So, yeah, just really excited to get this thing started.
Rob, what does an ADA sidewalk, what's different about an ADA, I mean, creating that kind of a sidewalk than just whatever we have right now?
Well, it's not a whole lot different than what we have now, but there are all kinds of different elements that we can bring in. Most of the tip downs and ramps that go through driveways and as you approach streets and things like that are in some way, one way or another, whether it be the pitch of the slope or the detectable warning strips. There's something about most of these crossings throughout this corridor that need improvement. And so that's really what the focus is going to be on. Also, the way technology is now with pedestrian activated beacons that can be placed at the crosswalks. There's a lot of different functions that can be included with that for hearing and sight impaired people that we don't have the technology in place to implement now. So there'll be parts of that that will come into play as well.
And Rob, on that subject, can you share a little bit about, I think Sophie told me that you and she had reached out to some community members and some disability advocates to sort of serve as an initial feedback committee?
Yeah, so as part of the project, we'll establish an advisory committee that will have firsthand input into the design elements of the project. We, of course, will be reaching out to the public in general, to the community for input, at least once, maybe twice, but then the advisory group will have more opportunities. And these are, members of the community that will have an opportunity to make some real, put some really important input into the way the project turns out. We haven't selected the entire committee just yet, but we'll be working on making sure that all aspects of the community are represented, the business community, school, all those sorts of different demographics.
And we would bring to council, as we normally do with something that is this big, kind of the design as it unfolds, and before you're awarding a contract, you would have some say into what is going to happen on the face of the earth. This is a lot of money. We're part of the money that Rob is requesting up from the bond will help with matching funds for this, but we are anticipating some significant highway safety money. Is it? I know it's MDOT. I don't know what pot it's coming from.
Yeah, there's a couple of different programs that we're hoping we're going to be able to access through the DOT, since the Route 2 corridor is a major concern, and the DOT has put a high emphasis on pedestrian safety, particularly in recent years, and so there's some funding available that I think, given our level of match, we should be able to access some of that. So that's one of the goals of the project, and one of the charges of the consultant will be to help us navigate through that process and make sure that we can get as much funding toward this project as we can get.
Good.
Are there any other questions or comments folks have about this?
Quick question. We did the whole study for this whole road a while ago. Is this the implementation of that? Or, I mean, was that solidified? Where are we with that? Because I know we talked about moving crosswalks and everyone wants only one crosswalk except right in front of their church or their whatever. So,
Right.
30.
Yeah, so the downtown traffic and circulation study was completed in 2017. And a lot of the aspects that I plan to have the next consultant evaluate will be coming from the recommendations of that study. I think there are a lot of good ideas in there that we will probably see end up on the street, but you know, I'm going into this project with an open mind. I think it's important that we look at all of our options before we commit to one. And like Sophie was saying, the first time you'll see us come back with to bring the consultant on board, but then there'll be quite a few more stepping stones along the way where we ask for council input and update council on the process before you end up seeing the construction contract before you. That's for sure.
Great, thank you.
Rob, are you hoping for spring to start this?
Yeah, I think that's why we're going to try to get them on board and get them out there and get the survey ready this fall, so that we can begin to work on design before you want to get the survey done before the snow flies, so you can make sure you don't miss any aspects of the corridor that you might be buried in snow. So it's pretty tough to do survey in the winter months. That's probably one of the first things they want to jump out on is getting a good picture of what that entire right-of-way looks like, and then we can build from that.
Rob, where in the process do you expect to get some feedback from DOT in terms of whether they're going to be able to participate in it?
I'm going to engage them I've already engaged them a little bit. They're aware of the project, and I would say they're working on ways that maybe they can work some funds our way. But I'll engage them throughout the entire process. That's the best way to go. Try to get them involved as soon as possible, and that way, if funding opportunities sprout up, you're fresh on the mind.
Good, great.
You have to be active because normally he just puts them in a conference room and feeds them coffee and won't let them leave until they give us money. No, I will never let you live that down.
I'll give this.
Sounds like a good strategy.
I'd even kick in donuts.
Sophie, so the next time that we will hear about this, we won't hear about it at this September council meeting, but we will at the October. Do you think that it would be a good idea maybe to attach to that a very, very brief discussion, not a discussion, but information for the public about the bond in case they missed that meeting where we talked about the bonding? I think it would be good for not to get too far in the weeds on it, but just so the public has a big picture idea of how we intend to fund such a big project.
I think that makes sense. And we will be in the process, if we follow through with the bond, the way that it's mapped out right now, we will be in the process of closing that out just as we hit the October meeting. So that I think that will work really well. We will know a lot at that point. I think the piece that's important is to also acknowledge and tie the fact that Rob's giving this presentation in front of the comp plan committee is because this is a central piece of the comp plan, the improving walkability and dealing with this corridor for safety.
And
Okay, does
I'm sorry.
No,
Just
go
wanted
ahead.
to mention that the RFP is out, like I said, and if you want to take a look at it, it's posted on the website.
Does anyone have anything else on this before we move on?
Yeah, I had a question. I have a train going by, so I was going to ask what's the overall geography, but I guess it's going to be in the RFP. So where did you say the RFP is posted?
Well, the scope of the project goes from the bridge on Main Street all the way to Deer Grove Pines. So basically all of the existing sidewalk on Route 2 in that corridor. But the RFQ is posted on the website.
Thank you.
Megan, if I could just interrupt before Rob leaves this meeting.
Sure thing.
Do you want to give them just a brief update on the MPI project? Kelly,
Kelly Road, yes.
I thought
Yeah,
I may
so
have dreamed it.
Last week I was able to work with DOT to pretty much, it's not on paper yet, but very close to getting about $130,000 to help fund a resurfacing project on Kelly Road from the interstate, basically from the interstate to Old Kelly Road for next season. So that's a 50-50 project. So that's a municipal partnership initiative project. So the DOT pays for half as long as the town's willing to pay for half. We had it in the plan next year for $200,000. And so we're going to be able to get that, what works out to be about a $260,000 project for about $130,000. I think it's going to be less than that by the time we get done. But so yes, we got some good news last week on that.
Is the Kelly Road Bridge done yet? It is? Okay.
Well,
The traffic is open.
yeah,
It is.
it's open. They're still working there. They're pulling the scaffolding and stuff down now. It'll be probably the end of next week or into the week after before they're completely gone. But
Oh, okay. All right. I've been avoiding it, so I don't know.
Well, that's excellent news. Thank you very much, Rob. And thanks, Sophie, for making Rob tell us that. Brag a little bit, Rob. Okay, item number 3, moving on, a legal opinion regarding the proposed MDR lot size. I assume, am I throwing this to Sophie or to Kyle?
After the last meeting where the council continued to discuss 5,000 square foot, reducing minimum lot size within the medium density residential zone to 5,000 square feet, I went out and did just a little bit of research. I talked to the town attorney and I also talked to Rob. So from an infrastructure standpoint, we across the board within the MDR, we do not have 100% infrastructure that could support density of that type, that amount. So if we were going to continue this discussion, you'd have to really be thinking about either allocating a considerable amount of money to upgrade primarily storm drain sewer infrastructure, or you'd have to look at targeting where the lot size changed. I also had a chance to talk with the town attorney, asked the town attorney to review the comprehensive plan to see whether or not dropping that much is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And you'll recall that whenever you guys are going to adopt or revise a land use ordinance, it has to go to the planning board, and the first thing that the planning board has to find is that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. So being inconsistent with the comprehensive plan creates a considerable issue. I've got some notes, so bear with me. the plain language of the relevant portion of the comprehensive plan suggests that comprehensive planning committee was balancing the need to increase opportunities for affordable home ownership close to services, jobs, and downtown, while at the same time protecting the character of existing neighborhoods. Obviously, the committee decided or determined that a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet accomplished both objectives. They did not provide an acceptable range of lot size that would accomplish both objectives, nor did they use a general descriptor, for example, smaller or less. The committee provided a figure, and that figure was ultimately approved by the council. To be sure, allowing 4 lots at 5,000 square feet each, where only 1 lot is allowed, is a substantial increase in the density and would almost certainly have a dramatic impact on the character of the neighborhood. That is from our town attorney. So if the committee wanted to move forward looking at a reduction of 5,000 to 5,000 square feet, it really wouldn't be appropriate for the comp plan committee because your job is to implement the comp plan. You could refer it back to council, and then council would have to decide whether or not it wanted to go through the process of revising the comp plan, which is a whole other process. Am I making sense? So we are in a process of sending Kyle out to have conversations with the community, and I wanted to make sure that you understood that there were some constraints, concerns, barriers here before we let him loose.
Sophie, I just have one question. And when we got the charts and the graphs, which I don't have in front of me right now, there were several lot sizes that were 20,000 square feet or 21,000 square feet that could conceivably be divided into 10,000 square foot lots. Is that the same process? Because the comp committee, if we just said maybe 10,000 would be a compromise or a balance between 5,000 and 15, but that would still have to go through that the council process as well.
Yeah, so what Roger was really looking at is the fact that within the comp plan and also the backup presentations, the committee was clearly looking to maintain the character. They use the term, it's the median lot, medium size lot for the zone, a lot. And so the idea being, where can we get some additional growth without changing the character? So based on the conversation I had with Roger, I would say if you were going to do anything other than 15, it would be taking Kyle's interpretation of the median lot size. And I'm going to guess it hasn't changed all that much since the comp plan was adopted.
Thank you, Sophie.
So I, for one, would not have been able to support a 5,000 square foot lot reduction. I think as we have followed the comp plan recommendations, I think they've served us well, and I would tend to stick with the comp plan recommendations.
I was thinking along similar lines, Tom, especially because we are this far into the current comp plan in its lifespan. In order to even consider that drastic a reduction in lot size, we would have to make changes to the current comp plan and massive infrastructure changes that at a certain point, you're just coming up on the next comp plan process. So in the process of gathering information from the community, I'm sure that Kyle will be able to get a sense of whether there's an appetite for a drastically smaller lot size and drastically higher density. And that information could be useful in the future, in the next couple of years, when the process of a new comp plan starts to get underway and when we maybe find more funding for infrastructure upgrades. But I don't think that it makes sense time-wise to start that process now.
Agree.
I really appreciate the investigations into what the challenges might be for reducing lot size. And I'm sure that the infrastructure around the town isn't necessarily there to support more houses in certain places, because we don't have infrastructure that was designed all at once for a certain size lot or a certain number of homes. However, when we make incremental changes, when it takes us so long, because we're such a deliberative body, and that's the way government is that there's lots of things to take into account and lots of different opinions, that when we move slowly and do very small increments, that we risk the possibility that we have still not met the needs of the people who are the most needy. We're lucky that we have such a beautiful town, and we don't have blighted properties like what that was common in Old Town and Bangor, and they've made a huge effort to try to deal with their blighted properties. What we just have is that it's very hard for people to get in to live here. So also, when we open it up to public comment, the people who would be most interested perhaps in buying properties that had smaller lot sizes, they're not actually even residents here right now. But our comprehensive plan is encouraging us to find ways for them to be able to buy in. So my suggestion would be also that there's always a possibility to put vocabulary that says, as we lower lot size, there are limits on being able to make a home at a certain lot size. One would be there'd have to be the infrastructure there. And we already have so many other limits, like there has to be 100 feet of road frontage. That's a significant limit to making a small lot work, because that small lot would have to be aligned along the front of a road. And so if we were to do a study or have a student perhaps do some kind of class project to find out how many lots would actually be impacted, and then once a lot is a possible lot to subdivide, the people who own it would have to want to subdivide. So we're still, when we don't go for a larger possibility, we are not creating many openings because there's so many other limits. So that's one of the reasons I was encouraging us to drop the lot size and let the other limits be the limit, not the lot size.
Yes, I think the point though is that we've just received a legal opinion that tells us that in order to do that, it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan. So there'd be an entire process of amending the existing plan in order to even consider that low of a drop. So the question before us right now is whether we want to kick this up to the full council, which is sort of funny because we're almost all here except for Cindy, but to begin that process. My point was timeline wise, I'm not sure if it makes sense, but we also haven't heard from everyone yet. So I don't know if Sam or Terry, if you'd like to weigh in.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts, Terry. I'll be quick. I agree with both you and Tom, Meg. And I do agree with Lori in the grand scheme of things, where it's like, yeah, we need to work on affordable housing. I don't think this is the solution. I don't think it fits right now. But because of that, does not mean at all that we don't think affordable housing and finding, other options is important. So I think the solution is out there. But I think right now, I agree with your assessment of the timeline with this current comp plan. And given the feedback we've gotten from our attorney, I absolutely agree with you. I don't think this is the time. I don't think this is the solution.
So I kind of was in the same camp of leaving the comp plan as is. Once Sophie made the comment about infrastructure, that you start really looking at it, and if you even looked at a large scale, what the cost would be, I would probably go out on a limb to say, I would venture to say that the average citizen would say, I worry about my lot, I worry about my space, and I'm not sure I want to kind of go into that infrastructure aspects of things. I think by looking at this is going to be a much bigger thing than just simply saying, this is what we'd like. So yeah, I would stick with what Meg and Tom said. Let's just stick with our plan and go from there.
I keep thinking back to many meetings ago, Sam made the comment, we already have a town. That's kind of the trouble, right? If we were building from the ground up, it would be a different story, and planning a town out of nothing would be different. But I understand, and I think that there's a lot of support probably on this council for the idea that has been gaining traction in city planning, that yes, these kinds of zoning lot sizes were used to create a certain kind of neighborhood that excluded certain kinds of people. I don't think that there's a lot of debate around that, and there's a lot of undoing that needs to be done in the name of equity, in the name of, you know, socioeconomic equity. But I'm not sure that this is the approach to simply change it in the ordinance, even though I'm not sure we're legally able to do that. I'm sorry, Sam.
No, real quick, and Cheryl, I'm sure you have comments. I don't want to jump ahead of you, but I was just curious as to, you know, with Kyle here, our in-house expert. Sorry, Kyle, I'm bringing you in off the bench on this. But what are your thoughts on this? I'd be very interested to know what you think, because you are the expert here. And no pressure, but just what are your thoughts? Are there trends, you know, even like on the horizon for affordable housing and that sort of thing?
So I'd say, as this is the comp plan committee and, you know, we're looking at the comp plan, the way it was addressed in the comp plan was that this overall lot size reduction was for the purpose of what Sophie was saying. They took the median lot size of the whole MDR and said the median lot size isn't the same as what the minimum lot size was. So it makes sense to drop it down to that median number, which is around 15,000. The idea of encouraging owner-occupied dwellings on smaller, affordable lots was addressed in combination with that by the idea of the village overlay. And that's where, you know, someone could potentially come in and do a subdivision in that overlay area of, you know, 7,500 square foot lots, or you know, 10,000 square foot lots, you know, using that higher density close to downtown where the infrastructure is better, and, you know, not as you're getting further out in the MDR away from some of the infrastructure. So the comp plan did try to address this idea of incentivizing you know, smaller lot sizes than just that 15,000 square foot reduction. There's a tool there to do that, and, you know, it specifically puts in place a system so that it would be for owner occupied and not just used to create new rental properties and things like that. So I'd say there was, when this was talked about during the creation of the comp plan, I wasn't here, but I can imagine that, you know, those issues were thought about. And, you know, planning theory hasn't really changed all that much in the last, you know, few years, where there's been some huge realization that, you know, oh, you know, in 2014 we should, you know, 15,000 is as low as communities can go, and now, you know, communities should go, you know, down to some other smaller number. So I think it was all thought about at the time of developing the comprehensive plan, and the overall reduction in lot size in the MDR was one aspect, and creating really smaller, more dense, affordable lots was, you know, kind of a different tool, and they were meant to work together. So that would be my opinion.
All I was going to comment on is I'm looking forward to the neighborhood groups to see what the town, how our residents respond to this. So I'd really like to just withhold judgment until we hear from the people.
Go ahead,
So-
Sophie.
All right. I don't like to talk over my bosses. It's not one of my favorite things. So I just want to be clear because Kyle's getting ready to put a presentation together and to go out into the community. And if I hadn't been before the comp plan committee and I was just charged with going and getting you, packages, having this information, he would go out and talk about 15,000 square feet, and he wouldn't talk about any other options. But you have had those discussions, and I just want to be clear. When I hear things like, I want to hear what the neighborhoods have to say, I don't know if what you mean is, are they okay with 15,000 square feet, or that you're expecting something different? Because what I don't want to do is engage his time and energy and the community's time and energy and be asking the wrong question.
Well, I think that our meetings have been public enough that people know that we've been deliberating or we've been thinking about lower than 15,000. So I think that maybe there might be some comments out there that might be a little bit more maybe overall what we've been talking about. I'm only speculating. I'm not really clear, but I think 15,000 is what we started at, and I think that's if that's the direction that we're going to go. But I do know that there are people that I've heard lesser than 15 that might have a comment, or might want to engage in some kind of discussion about that.
So Cheryl, would it be safe to say that we would expect Kyle to present on 15,000 square feet, but that probably he'll get a sense whether people freak out even at 15,000 or whether they say, hey, we would be cool with it being lower, or but not that Kyle has to prepare anything additional to 15,000.
Right, exactly, Megan, exactly.
Could there be a way possibly, if Kyle could include a brief summary of some of the conversations we've had, or would that just open a whole new, can of worms there? Because I get the whole thing of keeping this kind of on track with where we're looking at going based on, the discussion we're currently having. But, if I think some people might be for smaller lots. I have an inkling and just a suspicion that a lot of people will be like, what? But in full disclosure, and not to just rely on the assumption that we've had a few meetings, it's been publicized, so everybody knows, or the people that are really concerned and paying attention to this know. Transparency, I think, is pretty important.
So I'm going to try this one more time. What council ultimately decides is the appropriate lot size in the medium density residential zone is council's choice. And I am not trying to dissuade you from thinking big or dissuade you from making decisions. You are limited right now with the current comprehensive plan to either stay at 20,000 square feet or go to 15,000 square feet. Those are your choices. To open this and to know that if you were going to go lower than 15,000, which going to 15,000 doesn't preclude you from going lower at some other point in time. But if you were to go lower, then you're going to have to go through a comprehensive planning process. And that's not just, the last one took us 3.5 or 4 years to go from the start to the finish. So I am concerned about the confusion that you're going to put out there in the community if we start talking about 5,000 square foot lots or even 10,000 square foot lots. And ultimately, any decision that you make, if it was going to be less than 15,000, has to go through a comprehensive plan process, which will engage the public around whatever lot size comes out at that point in time. So I'm kind of, it's a weird place for me to be right now because I feel like in an effort to, well, it doesn't matter how I feel. Disregard that. Continue on.
You helped me, Sophie, with your comments just there. Okay. I don't want to, no, that's a bad option. Okay. I am not supporting that. I am fine with the way things are in that. I mean, I appreciate the thoughts and the ideas that were addressed. I think they may be addressed further down the road the next time we do maybe a revision of the comp plan or whatever. But right now, this would be way too confusing and mudding up the whole thing and pretty much guaranteeing nothing will get done. So thank you, Sophie.
So the conversation would be then whether the neighborhoods agree or disagree to a 15,000 square foot drop. What would the nature of the conversations look like then?
Could you explain how you would approach the community interaction piece around a change like this?
I missed what you said at first there. Were you just asking for a summary of what the meeting was?
I think folks are kind of interested in how you go out into the community, what your question would be, how are you engaging them, what are you asking
Right.
them, and what are you hoping to get feedback on?
Right. So with something like this, where there's already some specifics laid out in the comp plan, we're not just going out with a blank slate asking, for complete feedback to then base, something off of. There's already some idea, and that idea was based off of community feedback that happened several years ago. So that's sort of the foundation. So we would use that as the kind of jumping off point. So when I create a lot of, modeling and, graphics kind of showing what a change like this would be on the ground, I'm using that specific information laid out in the comp plan. If I create a model and it's unclear, the square footage reduction is kind of up to interpretation, it's hard for me to accurately portray what that looks like on the ground, because 5,000 versus 15,000, you're talking about, potential for 2 extra homes being in there. So when a community member looks at that, it would be difficult in presenting that information to cover every single scenario. So we kind of want to go in with at least somewhat of an idea and receive feedback based on that. So it's not so much just asking for an opinion in general. It's, asking for their opinion on a specific thing, or what specific problems do they see arising if their street looked like this, image that I'm showing them. And then we would take those concerns and, find ways to address them. But it wouldn't be, here's what your street is now, and here's what it would look like at 5,000 square foot lot sizes, and here's what it would look like at 6,000 square foot lot sizes, because that would be such a, convoluted thing to try to get across, and it would just be really difficult to get any meaningful feedback back, I think.
I personally feel as though, like I said, we don't seem to have an appetite for sending it up to council to revise the comprehensive plan in accordance with our attorney's opinion. And so I think it's appropriate to present on the changes we are considering that are within the scope of the current comprehensive plan. And that in that process, I think that just being able to read the room or read the feedback in the room will probably get a little bit of a temperature gauge about how people feel in general about the concept of lot sizes. I don't think that it's necessary to confuse the issue. And I also just want to remind, again, like, I think it seems to fall off the map a little bit when we talk about this particular MDR issue. But again, as Kyle pointed out, we have this concept of the overlay that would have an impact on density as you move, away. I mean, the MDR covers everything from a lot that's practically in the village center to all the way out, where it's farther away from services. So the fact that we have the overlay also is going to contribute to the ability to have more density. And I think that point gets lost a lot in this MDR conversation. So I just wanted to remind folks watching at home. Any other comments, feedback?
I'm also of the, because when we just talked about it, about keeping it on the current comp plan, that's where I want to be. I don't see anybody knocking down our doors wanting to create more density for their lot. I think this is something that if we stick with just the 15,000, it's a good starting point. And yeah, I think that I don't want to muddy the waters for Kyle either. It should be really a simple process that he goes out, gets the engagement with the individuals, gets their mindset, and then we go from there.
And I just agree also that, the overlay was a great solution to this without sort of having to change everything. So I think that's going to make a huge impact on addressing some of the goals that we have.
So Sophie, do you feel like you have what you need?
I do, and I just want to, when you talk about the overlay, that is specifically spoken to in the comp plan, so that is consistent. And that drops the lot size down to 7,500 square feet with owner occupancy requirement. Yes, I have.
All right, then since we have clarity on that, let's move on to item number 4, the official map process. Who's got this one? All right, Kyle.
Okay, so for presentation, I'm going to try to share my screen here. I cannot share my screen. It's been disabled. I don't know if someone can enable that for me.
Just a second, I got stuck.
No problem.
You should be able to share now.
Okay, thanks. Okay, can everyone see the title screen there? Okay. So this is just sort of an overview of what an official map is, why it's useful to have one in a community, and how you go about implementing one. So the reason that this is relevant to this committee is that it's recommended in our comprehensive plan. Volume 2 of the comp plan lists a number of issues / opportunities. And one of the ones in our transportation section of the comp plan talks about designing a street network that is equally accessible, safe, and efficient for travel by motor vehicle, bicycle, and on foot, and that promotes efficient extension of public utilities in public rights of way. So there are 2 recommended solutions for going about this. One is to adopt a complete streets policy, which has been brought up here and there before. The second one, though, is to prepare an official future circulation map. So that's where this idea of an official map comes from. So an official map is a map adopted by the legislative body of a community that shows present and future locations of streets, trails, parks, open spaces, and other public facilities. So, but primarily, the purpose of it is to show, well, originally when they were, kind of first popularized decades and decades ago, it was primarily to show streets and future streets and street widenings. But now they can be used for other things like bike and pedestrian pathways, future open space and parks, and other sorts of public facilities that a town might want to implement. So the map would usually be tied to the ordinance in some way. You wouldn't just create a map and then hang it up on the wall. and reference it, it would need to be tied to some sort of ordinance amendment that would be housed in either, if you had a complete streets ordinance or in the subdivision ordinance, somewhere like that within the land use ordinance though. So an official map, showing all this street connectivity and future use can really come in a lot of different varying levels of information and authority. For instance, years ago, they were used as more of a precise, ruling document where it showed exact locations and dimensions of proposed streets. And they would go, over private property, and, the community would say, this is basically going to be a street in the future. There's not really much discussion around it. This idea kind of led to a lot of legal issues and court cases over the years around the idea of what constitutes a taking, and was this really something that should be done. As time has gone on and there are more planning studies done and kind of advisory planning documents done by consulting agencies, and towns put together sort of visionary plans, you can use maps like this as purely an advisory tool, where you kind of draw onto the map potential future roadways and paths that can be referenced, but there isn't really, it's not quite as forceful as to what it is requiring. For instance, something along those lines would be like the service road mentioned in our Park Street transportation study. The plan recommended next to Park Street, parallel to Park Street, that a service road be put in, and they draw in a general location for the road, but there aren't really any specifics, and it's not a document with any authority that forces someone to do anything. It's just sort of there as a recommendation going forward, as if you were to do this, that might be a good idea. So in the section on the official map in the comp plan, these are some of the things that it points out. It doesn't go into a ton of detail. It just kind of covers these points, that the whole purpose of an official map is to guide the future interconnected routes of local streets and of pedestrian bicycle paths within the designated growth and transitional areas of the town. So it's really giving you a whole view of how the existing street system and transportation network within the town, how you can add future routes and streets to that to kind of connect everything together. The comp plan notes that this map should be completely advisory for property owners. So, like I was just talking about with, legal issues potentially coming up, the map is not meant to take away private property for someone, who, owns a piece of land and they just have a single family home there. And if, it's a large piece of land and the map shows that a future roadway could go through that piece of land, the map is not meant to say, you as this property owner, you have to build this portion of the road, or we're going to take this land from you. No, the comp plan says that there's no intent to limit the use of private property unless or until the property is subdivided. So the goal, as it's stated in the comp plan, is really for when bigger projects come in, and there's subdivisions taking place, that this interconnectivity be looked at in more detail. And it says, instead of creating a dead-end street, another subdivision with a dead-end street, that you should look to, you should use this map that we have and see if there are any viable street connections that should be implemented to kind of connect our existing street network. So the map would assist a variety of town departments in their long-term planning to extend and maintain street and utility systems. I mean, this would be useful for the water district, you know, the wastewater, fire department, public works. I mean, it wouldn't just be a kind of one department thing. This would really be helpful to a lot of different areas in town. Comp plan also notes to specify locations where the interconnection may consist of a paved bike and pedestrian path, or where there is a neighborhood benefit for a local street. So in some cases, maybe, the map identifies, this area would be good to start out as just a kind of formal bike and pedestrian path, but you leave the right-of-way, room on the map where it could potentially develop into a street in the future. Or maybe in a certain neighborhood, it's better to just mark it right away as potentially being used for a local street. And then the comp plan further goes on to say that it would also be good to identify future locations of public open space and playgrounds on the map. So an example of one of these maps would be this one I just found online. This is just sort of a cutout of a piece of it. But you can see that within the legend, it's focused on proposed facilities and existing facilities. So it's really showing the connection between the two. For instance, all the gray lines are their existing streets. The red is existing shared use paths. But if you can see in like this orange and gray dotted line here, that's where their proposed roads and proposed bicycle facilities would go. So it gives you kind of an easy to see, easy to read, specific plan as far as interconnectivity goes. You're not just saying as a town, we think connecting dead-end streets is a good idea, and that's something we want to do. It's giving you a kind of viable alternative in how to do it. So why is it important? The whole purpose of this is to kind of lay out a vision of how the town can expand and grow in a sustainable way. We have a lot of subdivisions in town that are on dead-end streets. And if you imagined subdivisions like that continuously going in and you get more and more dead-end streets, that's not really an efficient way of growing the town. So, having something like this really forces any larger development projects to kind of come in and grow in a more efficient way. We've talked about, with other projects and other topics in this committee, connectivity is a really useful thing to the town. It helps traffic circulation. It makes it easier for a lot of public departments to operate, whether it's snow removal or buses or fire. When things are connected and there aren't as many dead-end streets, it's just a lot easier for accessing. It also helps with things like water circulation when the pipes are able to kind of wrap around and connect with each other rather than just ending at a dead-end street. That's a useful thing. So the way that I view this, at least, is that whatever the document actually requires is sort of just an added bonus. At the very least, even if it's purely an advisory tool that only recommends to future development that certain roads be placed, that still has some value in it. Because at the very least, you're saying, if the situation arises and it doesn't make any difference one way or the other if you put a street here or if you match it to the map, then we have the tool in place to say this is the better option for a street to go in this specific location. And also, if something is going over town property, then the map is there to also kind of dictate the best option for the town. But if you look at it in combination with ordinance language that would require following this map if there was something like a subdivision, then it becomes even more useful. And right now we have language in our subdivision ordinance talking about, a subdivision goes into place and they have to give space for possible future road connections to neighboring lots if those lots are undeveloped. So that's sort of along the same lines of this, just not quite as forceful in what it's requiring. This would really be aiming at, we already have a street here and a street here. You're coming in and developing this lot right in the middle of it. So we're requiring that to the best of your ability, you put a road in connecting the two. Now, it's a useful resource to have for a community for sure, but there are obviously some challenges that come along with it. The first and probably most obvious is that a lot of people move to dead-end streets for a reason. They like the privacy and the quietness that comes along with that kind of environment. So when you start mapping potential street connections, the people in those neighborhoods may not be overwhelmingly supportive of that idea. Second, another challenge is there would definitely need to be a legal review and opinion on potential takings issues. So if you have an official map and you map a potential street that goes over private property, and you say, well, this isn't affecting you, it's only comes into play if there's a subdivision on this property at some future date. But what if a person living there at the time wants to build an accessory structure like a garage or something on their lot, and they can only do it in the area that you've mapped, where this potential street would go in the future. What's the authority there? Do you allow the structure to go into place, or do you prevent someone from being able to build a structure where they want to on their lot because you've dedicated this space on the map for a potential roadway in the future? So I think things like that would need to be answered ahead of time so that we had a list of alternatives. And it also, to a potential developer, it does add another kind of potential layer, a roadblock that they have to consider when developing a lot. So, if a developer is kind of already on the fence about, is it worth it for me to do this project? If they have to go out of their way to, create a street, kind of in addition to what they wanted to do originally, maybe that's the kind of, final straw and they decide not to do a project. I guess, that could be viewed as a good or a bad thing if they're not willing to, develop a subdivision in a way that benefits the town. Maybe the town, doesn't really want that sort of project anyway. So how it's developed, the official, this wouldn't be as simple as just creating a map and bringing it to committee for comment and then, going through a public hearing. It would be a pretty in-depth process. First, I think you would need to receive the legal opinion just so you know the constraints of the project. So, right from the get-go, there were no questions of, your kind of limits on what you could require or you'd want to require. But then after that, you'd want to kind of review all of the studies and the plans that the town has had done, Park Street study, the downtown, traffic improvement study, all those sorts of things that speak to our kind of transportation network. You would want to look at those. You would want to consult with various town departments to develop a list of possible future connections. The comp plan lists some responsible parties in this process, including the planning office, public works director, town council, and then obviously the neighborhoods that would be impacted. You'd probably also want to work with fire department, WPCF, and Orono VZ Water District, as they would all be departments that sort of could potentially benefit from a resource like this. So once you compiled all of those possible connections, you would want to take that information and then put it into a map format. And then that would be when you'd probably want to come to council for a review of that initial draft map. So that really gets you through kind of the first major part of the project, I would say, which is putting that initial draft map together with all of the connections that you have in mind. The second big piece to this would be the public outreach portion. So since the comp plan doesn't really mention any specifics, like for instance, we were just talking about the village overlay district, there's a defined area in the comp plan, where the comp plan identifies an area where the village residential overlay district should be. The comp plan doesn't give a list of exact street connections that should be included on this map. So, as I was just talking about, with the other topic that we just covered, going to the neighborhood with, a specific idea that's mentioned in the comp plan, this would sort of be the other way of doing things, where you're coming to the neighborhood with a brand new concept and you're kind of in a more open-ended situation. So public outreach would be a really vital piece of this. I mean, you're obviously going to get some resistance and hesitation in probably every neighborhood. At least, some portion of the population is going to have some reservations when it comes to something like this. And there's probably a lot of on the ground things in each neighborhood, unique to that neighborhood, that would be useful in learning when you're trying to map something like this. Something that you can't necessarily see or take into account just from looking at a map or satellite imagery. So once we were able to gather all of that public outreach, reaching out to the different neighborhoods, we'd want to bring that feedback back to council to discuss and then make any necessary changes to the draft map, bring that back to council for review. And at that point, then you'd probably be looking at starting the actual adoption process, where you'd be, having the map in combination with a ordinance amendment. So you'd go through the normal public hearing process with the planning board and council. So in conclusion, it can be a pretty long process to develop an official map like this. Both creating the map itself and going through the outreach process. There's I'd say a fair number of potential legal issues that can arise depending on kind of the regulatory capacity that you're looking for a resource like this to have. So those sorts of alternatives should be explored beforehand. So you avoid doing a lot of work and then realizing you can't really act on it. But the point I think of it is in the comp plan is that this is a document that would be incredibly useful to have for a number of departments in town. And it kind of solidifies the vision that the town has in regards to creating a more connected and more easily accessible community when it comes to multimodal transportation. So that is all I have. Open to any questions.
I just want to add or ask you to speak to one thing, which is while this made it through the comp plan, it made it through without any specific connections being put on a map. That was a deliberate choice. I remember having a conversation with Evan about that, because we know as soon as you start putting connections down, people are not, you're going to have some people that are excited about connectivity. You're going to have other people who don't want dead end streets opened up. And so one of the reasons we're here is to make sure that council at this stage, it's on your work plan to do an official map, but we wanted you to understand the pros and the cons of that and make sure that you want us to move forward, because I think the legal opinion isn't going to cause much of an uproar in the community, but it's also not going to inform your decision, really, I don't think. Do you, Kyle? I think it's more about drawing the box. And what we don't want to do is once we start showing people potential maps, I think unless this is something you really want to move forward on, you're going to create a lot of angst. If it's something that you have the desire to move forward on, I think it's a wonderful planning tool, but it's not going to be something that everybody in the community embraces.
I have a couple of questions. I try to look to see if anyone else wants to talk. So I have a couple of questions. How would this impact Orono Land Trust lands? Because Orono Land Trust is kind of woven in and out of our town as well. Would they be part of a conversation at some point? And also, would this map identify things like wetlands and the protected vernal pools and all of those places that we have that road, any kind of environmental impact is going to be detrimental? So would that be covered as well?
So I don't think this map itself, if you were designing it, would necessarily have the locations of those things on it, but we have those mapped in other areas. And obviously when you were putting something like this together, you would take that into account. If there was a vernal pool, right in between, there's two dead end streets and there's a vernal pool right in the middle, you wouldn't just draw that line right over the vernal pool. And, whereas, these documents were very specific originally, but a lot of times now, like in the Park Street study, there's a line drawn over a specific location, but there's room for adjustment when it comes to actually constructing the road in the future. So if some environmental concern shows up on the ground where the map, had drawn that road, then there's room for potential adjustment to avoid whatever natural feature there is. But obviously, yes, you'd want to take into account all those things up front. And as far as the land trust goes, there's a number of trails in place, and they have, there's a lot of land that might come into play that they use. So I'm sure they would be a party that we'd be engaged with a lot.
Thank you.
So,
Other comments, questions? Oh, sorry, Tom.
yes, Megan, the part of the presentation, Kyle, that really was important to me was talking about this tool as an advisory tool, that we aren't interested in taking land from private landowners. We're not interested in forcing people to do certain things. We're looking at it as an advisory tool for the future and for development in the future. And I think that's all positive. I certainly understand why I did live on two different dead-end streets in Orono, and I'm just sure that nobody on either of those two dead-end streets is going to be excited about connecting them. But I think there's good reason to look to the future and to use this as a planning tool.
Kyle, I have a quick question. You talked about the ability to have sort of a slight range of motion if an issue comes up, you know, connecting a road. Can you talk a little bit about if council were to adopt an official map, what the process of making changes? So if a developer came along and said, gosh, this really doesn't fit with my plan, you know, are you willing to talk about it? What is the process that council would have to go through?
So I don't think the council would have to necessarily do anything in a case like that. I think it would be probably done at the development level. So with the planning board, you know, I mean, there's language in our ordinance already where it, you know, it specifies, you know, something needs to happen in a specific place, but if it can't be done in that place for some reason, some environmental factor or whatever, that, you know, the project be done to the maximum extent, you know, practical extent possible. So there would probably be similar language like that in whatever section of the ordinance that we put this in, where it said, you know, follow the map to the maximum extent practical. If there's some feature on the ground that requires, you know, some deviation to the map, that's okay. But I don't think it would require amending the map to show that specific change, then going back to the development and saying, okay, now you can do it.
Thank you. Folks we haven't heard from yet, any comments, questions?
I think
Yeah,
Matt,
Go ahead. I was just going to say that I like the idea, and especially if we can create it without putting anything in it yet, because I understand that this is definitely going to be one of those things that it would be a great tool, but not really saying we're doing anything would be more optimal. But we can still just create that tool to use though without having to do anything with, correct, Kyle?
So you can, you know, create the map, and from what I've read in other states and communities, you know, the creation of the map itself, you know, you can put a line on a map over someone's property, and that doesn't constitute a taking. You're not, you know, it's an issue doesn't come up until, you know, some action is taken place. So if you know, want to create just the map with some outline potential routes on it, and just, you know, specify this is, you know, purely for advisory purposes, then nothing changes for the people who own those lots at all. You know, I think it would just be kind of key during the outreach process to inform people that, you know, just because there's a line in this area doesn't necessarily mean that it's, you know, guaranteed to happen. No one's going to come and take your land, or, you know, prevent you from doing what you want to do on your lot. But yeah, even in an advisory capacity, the map would still probably show the actual general proposed routes.
So yeah, I was to say I agree with Councilor Perry, the same thing, that I think this would really be a good tool.
and yes, my first job was mapping. I love maps. I think they're a great tool for showing what the plans are or what the potential plans are, so people can discuss it. You know, the whole picture's worth 1,000 words. I think that it's a great tool for communities to see both what things are definite and what things are a potential for the future. And so I am very supportive, and I'm so glad that you brought this to us to show us what you've been thinking about and what the comprehensive plan has encouraged us to do.
I think this is great. I understand how it has that magical power of creating massive anxiety. Change is a horrific thing for a lot of people, especially when things have been the way they have been for 30 plus years. I think I've certainly had ideas and discussions about possible areas for, and issues of, or ideas for interconnecting certain areas. And yeah, there are people on both sides of it, but I think we're left with no clear vision or tool to move forward, if that's even a possibility, without this. And so even though it does, it's like, Ouija boards sort of summoning the evil, things of possible development. But it's, I think we need it. I think we're not doing our job if we don't get it. So.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Tom's initial comments as well. And I'd only add that I think that we've been taking the approach in the last few years of codifying certain aspects of town operations. We've been talking about 15 to 20-year strategic planning for finances, for infrastructure. I think this fits into that. I understand it will be a lot of heavy lifting. I understand there'll be a lot of feedback from the public. Ultimately, I think as well, I suspect that if we take the brunt of some of that feedback now, it could also ease the way in the future, allow people to get used to the idea of different points of connectivity and different things that might happen. And then when it actually maybe does become a reality down the road, maybe they're a little more used to the idea and it's not quite as anxiety producing. So do you have everything you need from us?
Yep.
So then-
I think so. I mean, I do.
Yeah, the next step will be for you to reach out to Roger and get kind of your box. Okay, excellent.
So I think that brings us to a brief town manager's report.
How about we call it a town manager's report today?
Uh-oh.
I'm going to start with the easy stuff. Just reminding folks that Monday is the Labor Day holiday, and so we have no meetings and town hall is closed. I also want to share that our code enforcement officer is on medical leave. You will see an ad for an anticipated vacancy in code enforcement I don't know if it will hit the advertisement this week or next week. I don't know where we hit the cutoff for that, but the departments are really pulling together. We have 2 certified code officers, other code officers in the town, plus a mutual aid agreement with the City of Old Town with Dave Russell. So at this point, our assessor is helping us with all of the site inspections. So he's doing the inspections up at the university and at the school as needed. He's helping us with plumbing inspections. Our life safety inspector is a certified building inspector. So he's doing construction-based like building inspections. He's also helping us with complaints of trash cans left out too long or people parking on the lawns. I will tell you that with this framework, we are, while we are responding to those, it's taking us a little bit longer. So if you get complaints from people in the community, because we're not responding to their neighbor not taking their trash can in by 11 o'clock the day after trash has been picked up, you're just gonna help me and explain that we've got an unexpected issue happening here. I have directed Mike, because he was going to try to do some inspections along with Vision for the reval to try to reduce that rate. It's about a $4,000 savings that he was hoping to find there. At this point, I need him to cover the school construction and the university, the engineering building. So we have given Vision the bulk of the work. He will be back in a little bit to, I think at the end of next month, he'll be back to give you an update on where they are with that. But Dave and his team, Kyle included, he left, they are all stepping in and doing a great job to cover this. I don't know if folks saw, but earlier this week we dropped postcards to every postal customer, informing them of the marijuana public hearing and also the emergency ordinance. So people can't say that they weren't notified. Maybe they didn't read it, but they were notified. Last night I participated along with both of the chiefs, Jeff and Josh, in a community town hall with the University of Maine president, members of her cabinet, and representatives from the city of Old Town. I don't know, did everybody here see it anyway? I see a couple. I think it went pretty well. The science that they provided was really interesting, and they are doing a phenomenal job. They have care teams to support people that are off campus. They're in constant communication with my team and me. So I think we have a good handle on this. The thing I took away from the town hall was 9 years ago when I was hired, one of my primary jobs was to rebuild a relationship with the University of Maine. And as I sat back and watched the town hall, it just became very clear that the relationship is in fact there. And it is a partnership. And when the chips are down, we really are coming together and collaborating on the basis of a good relationship that's already there. That's not saying it can't get better and it can't grow, but I feel like maybe we've made some progress on that, which was really kind of neat. The notices, when every business owner that has a public facing business, so if you're a home occupation that you're not seeing the public, we did not hand deliver you an ordinance. But for people who have, the open doors that the public is flowing in and out of, we hand delivered about 150 ordinances with a cover letter on top of them explaining that the council had adopted the emergency ordinance, that we were here to support our business community and we wanted to help them, and that if there was anything we could do as they enforced this ordinance, we would be there with them, and that we were doing this in an effort to take some of the heat off them, because they would just be enforcing a town rule as opposed to their own rule. And they also received a notice, a copy of a sign that we have since made into clings, window clings, and we will start delivering those on tomorrow. They will begin to get delivered. Somebody from community, so the police department really helped us out delivering the ordinances to everybody. The community development's going to follow up with the window clings to make sure that businesses get a face-to-face and understand who they can reach out to for help and what the expectations are. Chief Lowe reports that he has received plans from all qualifying residential complexes. You will notice, I don't know if people have noticed on Facebook, if y'all have liked the Ave, I've liked the Ave on Facebook. They have closed their pool because of the town ordinance. So they have made some shifts in their operation. He had received all of them, gone through all but one he was still in the process of going through. Some of them needed some minor revisions, but people were really willing to work with him, and we have acceptable plans in place. So we're kind of excited about that. We have divided duties up internally. So businesses who want to talk about the fact that we have an ordinance or need some signage, and we ordered 8,000 masks, so they should be on their way. They're looking for that. They would reach out to community development specifically Dave. Somebody wants to talk about the council process, they're always welcome to call you, but they also can call me, and I can walk them through why we did what we did and what the ordinance says. If people, especially businesses, need technical support in understanding, like, I don't know how I can make this work in my business, or I don't even understand what it really says, they should be reaching out to the fire department, most specifically Rob. St. Louis is handling all of the technical support. And enforcement, if people are concerned because the ordinance is not being complied with, they can call the fire department, most specifically Rob St. Louis, to lodge their complaint. He has, I had it somewhere. We've done, I think we've had 3 business complaints, the entire, even before the ordinance. And one of those is a repeat we're going back to tomorrow. Our philosophy, as I said in the town hall, I'm not interested in levying fines. I don't want to make money. I want people to comply. So our thought is the first trip down is pure education. The second trip down is education with a reminder that compliance is really important. A third trip is probably going to garner some referrals to the state and potentially some thought here about how we can, whether or not we need to think about pulling out the fine opportunity. So we had a complaint in a neighborhood of a couple of, they just happen to be side-by-side houses with lots of people, lots of gathering, lots of noise. And we sent the police out today to do the knock on the door, just a knock and talk. Hey, you're ruffling some feathers in the neighborhood. This is what we're seeing, and why are you, kind of, can we help you settle it down a little bit? The next time, if we go, we probably would be thinking about a referral to student conduct if it continues. So the thought being, I'm trying to get voluntary compliance, but at the same time, going back 5 or 6 times kind of defeats the purpose, right? I mean, I'm looking for some guidance here, folks. I don't want to be too quick to pull the fines out, but on the other hand, continuously going to large parties is probably not really healthy in the community these days.
I think I'll give you some feedback. I think you're handling it really well. I think we're in incredibly uncharted territory before, but I think also, even with students coming back and a lot of this buzz, people maybe, and not just students, but everybody could be getting a little complacent and a little out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. And even if people are being incredibly diligent and wearing their masks and sanitizing, they can still get this. And I don't think people are thinking that that's a possibility, but by God it is. So I think you're handling it really quite well. Thank you.
Yeah, Sophie, I agree with Sam. I think you are handling it well. I do have a concern though about consistency of enforcement. If you go to one business or one place three times and there's no fine, but somebody else you go 3 times and there is a fine, then I think we're going to get into some difficulty because people are going to know they came and I didn't get fined, but you did.
I hear what you're saying. I do think that businesses are a little bit different than personal homes. And I think because with personal homes, many times I have the tool before I even go to fine of student conduct. Many times, not all the time. I do think that we need to use some discretion about the business, if the business is making an effort or not. If, you know, I suppose you could do it very black and white. We get 3 complaints, and on the 3rd complaint, you get a fine. But I also want to look at, are the employees all wearing masks? Are the businesses controlling the things that they can control without getting into fisticuffs with their customers? Because I don't think we want to set that up. Does that, and I know it begins to feel arbitrary, but I try to think, how would I feel as a business if I was making every effort and I just got people coming in who weren't going to comply? And so
No, I
I'll tell
understand
you,
what Vince?
yeah. I'll say that as a business owner of a downtown business, if I have, for example, a visit from code enforcement and they look around and they say, hey, listen, this is an issue and you got to take care of it. They don't come right up and fine me as soon as they look at something and they say, oh, you can't have that door that way. You have to fix it. And that's what I think that's what the businesses in town are used to, is that kind of interaction. And so most businesses will say, oh gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize, or yes, I'll fix it right away. And I think that if I were to say to Bill, like, well, okay, sure, but I don't believe that door needs to be that way, go away, Bill should fine me. And I don't think we should be afraid of the fine. I know that there's been a lot of negative press, a lot of internet comments and things about, oh, what is this, just a money-making scheme? I don't think that criticism should make us afraid to use the fine, because it's there for an important purpose. We're worried about public health, and we need to make sure. And I think that if we use the same approach that we use with all other kind of code enforcement related issues with businesses, I think that that's the right way to do it. We give folks a chance to do the right thing, and they understand that if they don't make the changes necessary, whether it's fixing a fire door or insisting their customers wear masks, then they're going to have a fine. And so I wouldn't be too afraid. I would rather have voluntary compliance as opposed to fining people as well. But it is a tool at our disposal to do what's in the best interest of the public.
Council supports that, because ultimately you are the ones that are going to take the heat, because I will tuck right in under your wing. I think what I'm taking from Tom, though, I think is also very good, which is the idea of we can use discretion, which is what we use all the time, but we should really be documenting what is driving the decisions that we're making.
Good. And Sophie, we do have another business sector on the other end of Godfrey Drive.
Oh, spoken with them.
Yeah, that they're a little less concerned, I think, even today. So that's an area of town that I worry about over there, because I shop over there, so I know. But I mean, I have a choice of not shopping there, or they could comply a little bit more with the ordinance.
I had been told by people who work over there that they were, so that they were doing better. So I will go double check.
They weren't doing so hot today, but mostly.
Gotcha. All set to move on?
Well, Sophie, I just wanted to say that you were talking about somebody calling in about 2 neighborhood places. That's a totally separate thing that we don't have control over. I know that we had kind of conversed about that. I think we missed out. I think it was probably Meg and I who were the only 2 that, in theory, went for option 3 that would possibly have encompassed them. But when they're not part of the business downtown internal stuff, there's really nothing you should have to worry about with that, as long as they're not going over 50 people. And I mean, if it's a noise issue and stuff like that, then that's a normal thing that people deal with.
I think you've got the noise issue piece. The other piece you have is I think the gatherings may exceed the 50 people, Terry, which is part of the complaint. These are also historic issues. They both have been the subject of consent decrees. So we've kind of taken a little bit stauncher position with these people. But I totally, and people need to understand that we do not have power to enforce the face coverings on private property. That is an absolute no-go.
Sophie, is contacting the university something that neighborhood residents have at their disposal? So who exactly should they contact?
There is a email called alerts.umane.edu. Is that the, if you go online, you'll see it.
It's maine.edu.
maine.edu/alerts.
I thought it was alerts at maine.edu.
There you go.
Yeah,
That's
something
hilarious.
like that. Right.
That will immediately be seen by campus. They are taking that very seriously. Very seriously. So I think the message I'm trying to give you is we're working through it. If you have issues, instead of trying to figure out where you should send them, just call me, you counsel, just call me and I'll see what we need to do with it. I think that will be the easiest way, especially if people are calling you. Sound good? Ready to move on? So let's talk the election. The governor came out with a new executive order that limits the number of people on the polls on the floor to 50. And we're seeking some guidance because 50 people in the field house is like almost not having anybody there. Whereas 50 people in council chambers would feel a whole lot different. We're trying to figure out if we can split the polling location in half at the same place. We're trying to figure out if we could say 50 over by voter registrar, 50 in line, 50 on the actual voting. Shelley is doing a lot of running around right now. We have a new addition to the front of Town Hall. If you were to come in the normal main door, right to the right of that door, as you look at Town Hall, there is a black box and a weatherproof paper holder that has absentee ballot applications in it. We will have pens out there with directions to just drop your pen in the box with your ballot, with your completed application so that we can sanitize them. So we will only have people using the pens once. We'll pick them up, protected, sanitize them and put them back out. So it is a way that people can request an absentee ballot without talking to anybody. And that's pretty cool. You have to be registered in order to be able to do that though. That ballot, the drop box that we're using for absentee requests right now will actually turn into a ballot drop box once the ballots have been given out. We actually purchased 2 of the boxes in hopes that we would be able to put one on campus. We have been denied by the Secretary of State's office. They say that ballot boxes must be on municipal property in close proximity to the town clerk's office. That really creates some problems for us. And so, Belle oversees the front office. She's also normally a warden for elections. She is going to step up and push back a bit with the Secretary of State's office. We're going to try to take Shelley out of it so that Shelley can maintain her cordial, kind, collaborative relationship with staff at the office. But we don't think that there's actually a prohibition to putting a ballot box up on campus, and right outside the Memorial Union is where we want to put it. And it's my understanding that the university would be happy to host it. There's a lot of activity there. People come and go. It's not, you know, in some secluded corner where somebody could do bad stuff to it and never get caught. So Belle is actually going to take the next charge. It's my understanding that she might have a plan C if she doesn't succeed. I think the plan here is to really push this as far as we can. Having people not have to come all the way down to town hall to drop off their ballot is kind of a big thing in this day and age. Along with advertising for the code enforcement officer, we also have a WPCF operator and a public works equipment operator ads out right now. I want to just make sure council understands that these are positions that were funded fully in the budget that are necessary to maintain minimum operations for the department. So I gave the okay to go ahead and fill those positions. And finally, tax bills. We committed taxes late last week. Tax bills will go out either today or tomorrow. They get completed by they get printed, stuffed, mailed by a third party, a print shop for us. We committed taxes at 2809, which is what we had published, with a $75,000 overlay, which is pretty darn close to what we had published. The one thing that I didn't catch until it would have stopped the whole process and made us another several days late, because we would have lost our place in line. When there are multiple ways to calculate the percentage of the tax burden, we historically have done that backing out the TIF, because when we go through the budget process, we don't have that information. And the TIF benefits both the town and the school because it drops the value of the taxable value. So we have normally published the budget percentage that is calculated as part of the budget process. Our assessor backed into it with the TIF expenses and the TIF value, and and allocated Homestead and Betty a little bit differently than I do in our calculation. Talking with him, both methods are okay. And my argument is that we should go back to the way we've always done it, so that it's consistent. But for this year, that is going to look a little wonky to people if they bother to look at the top piece. Given how much grief the town gets from the tax bill, with people not understanding how much of that tax bill goes to other entities, I am not sure how much people really look at that breakout. But just want to give you the forewarning that looks a little odd this year. All right. So taxes are going to be due September 24th, 25th. Interest will begin to accrue. I think that's it. And I've got Terry and Cindy have okayed the calendar for council and community development committee. If Tom and Megan could just look at it before I publish it, and then start making all the Zoom meetings, that would be great. So that's all I have.
All right. Well, I was afraid at first, but that actually, that was fine. I thought bad news was coming or something. All right, folks. Well, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? All right, thank you, everybody. And we are going to see each other Thursday, right, for finance and operations?
Thursday is finance and operations. That's going to be a really interesting meeting. I will have a draft of the public hearing presentation for the bond. So this will also be an opportunity for you to give feedback, for me to be able to change if I should be showing different things. The numbers continue to come in really good. We ran numbers again this week with the appropriate repayment schedules. So I think it looks really good for that. The marijuana ordinance public hearing is on the 14th. And we're also going to talk about disposing of 25 College Heights. The public hearing happened before we foreclosed. The last time we thought that we might have had a legal foreclosure, and we had a problem with a notice. This time we're good. We need to do the public hearing for that and the bond. So it's kind of busy. It will be a good finance and operations committee. We're also talking about asset management. Rob and I have a plan to give you a foundation for your long-term finance plan. And so we're going to talk to you about that. So it's barn burner.
Quick scheduling question. Are we going to start meeting at 4:30 from now on for everything?
Well, I have the environment committee still meeting at 5.
Right.
But everything else at 4:30.
Okay. All of our meetings, our council meetings and everything. Okay.
I thought.
Duly noted.
Yeah, my thought was to keep things consistent.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure.
If people have issues because they're getting back into work or the swing of whatever, let me know and we can bring it back for more discussion.
All right, well, I hope everybody has a relaxing long weekend and we will reconvene next week. Bye.
Stay safe.